This is the KeepKey and ShapeShift panel. We will be exploring career options in the wild world of crypto. So just to start off, just a brief introduction of us. My name is Connor O'Hara. I'm a sophomore at the University of Colorado, and I'm going to be moderating this panel.
My name is John, and I am the COO at ShapeShift.
I'm Emily, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer at ShapeShift.
My name is Justin. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at ShapeShift and also a proud buff.
Yeah.
And I'm Ken Hodler. I'm the Executive Engineer at KeepKey. I had to check my title. It's changed. And it's really awesome to be here with you guys.
Thanks for coming.
All right, so the first question. What is ShapeShift and KeepKey?
What is it? So, do you want us to just choose?
I think that each one of you can
Or we
voice
can
your
each-
opinion, if you'd like.
Well, that one's hard for us to all voice different opinions.
John, you take it.
Okay.
Do it.
Yeah.
So ShapeShift is a digital asset exchange, meaning that we allow people to convert very quickly and easily between different types of digital assets. So if you have some Bitcoin and you want some Litecoin or some Ethereum or something like that, what ShapeShift services is essentially like a non-custodial vending machine. You put in one asset and you get another one out, and this can all be done either through our website or through our API. So a lot of actual multi-asset wallets and such will actually integrate our API to make it really easy to just exchange your assets without ever having to give us custody of your funds. So at its very base point, that's what ShapeShift is. But ShapeShift is also a company that has a suite of products. So that is our main product, and we have a number of other ones that we can talk about.
Including.
Yeah.
Well, so I like to think of ShapeShift as a holding company for KeepKey. No, I'm kidding. It's a joke. KeepKey is a hardware wallet, and it's just a product of ShapeShift. And so we build it's a device that's essentially what it does is it stores a private key, and then you can send it data that it will sign. So in the case of for cryptocurrency, you're sending it cryptocurrency transactions, and then it's using the private key that it stores to sign those transactions. So, and it does it in a way that's very secure. The key is never exposed and very secure.
Yes. If you have more than $500 worth of crypto, you should get a hardware wallet.
Yes,
for
for sure.
tomorrow.
Absolutely.
I would agree. So
Yeah.
for the next question, this is something that we do have for every one of the panelists. How did you get involved in blockchain technology?
Let's go to you two first.
I actually met our CEO, Eric Voorhees. He was looking for someone to take on marketing, and it was, I think ShapeShift had been launched in August of 2014, and I met him in November of that year, and I knew nothing at that point about cryptocurrency or Bitcoin, and he spent a few hours with me talking me through it, and then asked me if I wanted to take some time to think on joining the team. And it was a very scary week of me trying to figure it out, but I did a bunch of research and then ended up joining. And that's kind of how I got involved in the space with no prior background to that. So
I found out about Bitcoin back in 2011 from a podcast called Econ Talk, run by a guy named Russ Roberts. He was interviewing Gavin Andreessen, who was the core maintainer back in those days. Heard about it. It sounded kind of scammy. Meant to look into it deeper and didn't. Kind of put it on the shelf for a while. And then a friend of mine sent me a little Bitcoin and kind of said, try this out. Was able to just, every skeptical question I had, started answering. And I just became progressively more and more interested. More and more I learned about it. That's a theme I see pretty consistently across people that are in this space is the more that you learn about it, the more fascinating you become and the more desire you have to learn more about it. So flew to New York, met people like Charlie Shrim and some of the people that were running BitInstant back in those days, which was the only way to buy Bitcoin in the US really back in 2012. And just progressively kind of fell down the rabbit hole and managed to find a job, and here I am.
So my story is very similar to that. I discovered it in 2011. I think I went down the rabbit hole right away, but I didn't actively seek employment in the field for about till I think 2014 or 2015 is when I started at KeepKey. And it was something that it's one of those. It's the more you look at it, the more interesting it becomes. It's like this infinite. The more complexity you open up, the more complexity there is to explore, right? And so that was kind of the thing that kept me coming back. And then at some point I was just like, I was working at a website company, and I was like, this is really not the thing I want to be doing. The passion that I have is this technology. I think has the potential of being world-changing technology. So at that point, I started to seek out an opportunity to work in the industry, and sure enough, I ended up at KeepKey, and I don't regret a day of it. It's been the most interesting and engaging job that I've ever had. So I think it really comes down to, if you've got a passion for it, follow that passion.
Definitely. Yeah, for myself, I think maybe actually, so Justin mentioned earlier, but I actually also went to CU. And when I think near the end of my college career here, I had heard about Bitcoin when the white paper was first published, and I kind of looked at it, was like, oh, that's kind of interesting, but that'll probably never work, and I kind of dismissed it. And then about a year and a half after that, I started getting really interested just in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, reading about it online, researching it, and just became very quickly convinced that the technology wasn't going anywhere and that it was very important and was going to change a lot of things that we did. And I was so fascinated and wanted to be involved with it. And I was running another web and mobile application development company at the time that I had helped found. And it just so happened that we decided we were going to start taking Bitcoin, and we were one of the first ones actually in Denver to do that. And that led to me meeting Eric, the CEO of ShapeShift, and basically that spawned the beginnings of ShapeShift. So ever since then, it's just kind of been my life, and like Ken said, I don't regret a second of it.
So it sounds like everybody is pretty passionate about blockchain technology. What makes you so passionate about it? What kind of draws you to this?
So for myself, it's really just it's this kind of combination of all of these various interesting fields between technology, philosophy, politics, economics, psychology. All these things kind of come together in Bitcoin and blockchain technology, because it's more than just a technology. It's a technology and an incentive system for people. And that incentive system is actually what makes it very interesting. And without the people involved in the psychology of those people and the game theory involved, it actually wouldn't be nearly as interesting. So all those things kind of come together, and it really provides a foundation for us to reimagine not only our financial system, but pretty much anything that has an intermediary, anything that requires trust, and that's very fascinating to me.
For me, as I was saying earlier, I had no prior background in this, or even in finance, or tech. So when I came into it, I had quite the learning curve, and going back into the phrase everyone uses is going down the rabbit hole. The more I was learning and also interacting, tech is it's seen as, especially when you're talking about cryptocurrency, where it's something that's it's not a visual concept, so it can be a little hard to really understand it if you're not coming from the tech side. The more I started learning, and also, it's with it being such a global world that we live in, getting to travel and meet these people and learning these stories about people who, from various backgrounds, like when we're in South America and Argentina, being able to see the problems that it's able to solve in these communities that really have a lot of trouble with their banks and their governments. And the more that you meet these people, the more passionate you become about it, because you realize what you're doing is allowing so much change to happen globally. And that, to me, starting to learn more about that side really made me want to continue to work in this field. And there was a time at the beginning where I thought, oh, we'll just see how this goes, and I can move on and go. And I come from a hospitality tourism background initially, and so I was like, well, I'll just go back to that. I never want to go back there. It's not, every day's different, every day's new, you're learning more and more. Some days are super hard, but I think that it's every day that was incredibly fascinating. And the ability to be involved in that, I think for probably all of us, not to speak for you guys, but being able to know that we get to be involved in this is really special. And I don't think a lot of people, I look back at my life before this and I'm like, I don't even want to go back to that world. So this is where we should be. So.
Connor, do you want us all to answer? Or?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. So for me, I come from the finance side before blockchain and Bitcoin, and I see the current financial system as not serving most people, especially globally. In the US, it's obviously a little bit better, but 2/3 of the world doesn't have a bank account. So as the internet economy starts to take hold and we're all loving, we can order on Amazon and do all these things and earn income online, most of the world can't take advantage of that today. So there's just a structural unfairness in how money is distributed, handled, how you can earn it. And that's not even to get into the governmental structures that kind of define all this. And Bitcoin and this entire space provides an ability for individuals to take that power back and live whatever life they want. That's what really makes me love my job every day. The fact that I feel like I'm making some sort of small contribution towards allowing anyone who wants to participate in this global economy that's obviously coming.
Yeah, I agree with everything that everyone just said. My background is that my degree is it's a humanities degree, and basically it's cultural history was the area of study. I have a minor in computer science. I'm a true nerd. I'm a true techie, but really I have this passion for the cultural changes that happen over time in society. I've had the tremendous opportunity to watch the world change as the internet was adopted. Nothing is the same as it was, say, 25 years ago because of the internet. This is like the next wave. It's almost like the internet was the technology that was built to enable these systems to exist. These cryptocurrencies and like the smart contract systems that are part of Ethereum. What's the word I'm looking for? The autonomous systems that exist as part of Ethereum. It's almost as if the internet was the enabling technology to allow these other technologies to come into play. And we're like at the days of dial-up AOL. If you're going to compare it to the internet, as far as blockchain is concerned, right? We're still at the very, very, very early stages of the adoption of that, and I think it's going to be a transformational technology change, to the world, and cultural change to the way things are done in the world. And looking back 25 years from now, we won't even. It'll be like, how did we ever do anything without that technology?
Yeah. The whole idea of the current monetary system will seem very silly in retrospect one day.
Yeah. Pieces of paper with presidents printed on it.
Yeah.
Our
Backed
kids
by
our
faith.
kids are going to laugh at that.
So it sounds like everybody comes from a pretty diverse background in terms of what they studied or what they were doing before they came into the blockchain space. So what type of companies and job opportunities are there in blockchain and crypto space? Is this something that's limited only to computer science majors, or is this something that really anybody from any background could get into?
I don't think there's a computer science major sitting up here.
No, there isn't actually.
Yeah.
Good point.
So there's your answer right there.
So there are no computer science jobs in this space. Clearly, there's plenty of engineering-related jobs, but there are pretty much everything. Just like any other, as these companies develop, they need everything. So like right on, up here we have myself from an operations role, Emily from marketing, Justin in finance, and Ken with still ending up in a software engineering role, even if that wasn't where he started. So there's all sorts of opportunities for these types of things, and also depending on what types of companies. And actually, it's very important that not only the technologically and engineering focused people get involved in this stuff, because we need rounded out teams. We need whole teams that can actually look at like an entire business opportunity and bite off the whole chunk, both from an engineering perspective, but also from a product and business perspective, and all these other perspectives that are needed to really make something usable by the mainstream. You know, as for as much popularity as crypto and blockchain has gotten in like the last year, and certainly since I've gotten involved, it's still pretty small. Like a lot of people have heard of it, but only a very small fraction of those people have been involved or actually have bought any cryptocurrency or ever used it. And so we still need a lot of work to get this ready for mainstream adoption, and that requires all sorts of skill sets.
And the nice thing with a lot of companies that have seen growth over the 2017 and 18 period, almost every crypto company I know is hiring. I can't think of one that's not. So it's a good time to be interested in the space and building something here.
Yeah, and I think I was just at a summit a few weeks ago in which we got into the discussion of widespread adoption and you know, where are our pain points and what do we really need to work on? And development, of course, is, you know, to Ken's point earlier, we're in dial-up zone. Like we're still everything's still so new, and so on that side, we've got, you know, developers are having to learn languages and protocols that have never existed. So that's its own pain point. But then when you come into the marketing design realm, there is a lot of need for very well designed, intuitive, easy to use websites. So our company is fairly well known for those who have ever used it or are familiar with a lot of the other companies, and being an easy onboarding process. And there are a few other companies, but there are a lot that aren't. So really taking time to also hire on that UX UI design side and making sure that you're doing user testing and talking to your customers and figuring out what confuses them. I think that a lot of times when you are in such a tech heavy industry, there are a lot of companies that they feel like that can happen later, but actually it kind of needs to align. And we were lucky enough, you know, Eric's background, it allowed us to understand that we still needed to hire for that side of things as we moved along this process. And also even branding. There's a lot of need for really good people that understand branding in that process, because, you know, when we first started, we'd laugh and be like, we're getting on another biz dev call with another bit, blah, 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 and everyone could confuse the names. And then we constantly would like talk about a different partner that wasn't that one just because their names were almost all exactly the same.
Yeah.
Or you'd get on their site and you'd be like, what am I looking at? So, you know, and that's changed significantly, and especially in the last year and a half or so, where there's a lot more attention to that. And I think, from my perspective as a marketer, that skill set is starting to be highly sought after and needed. And, you know, as I've been hiring my team even, I try to find people that have the marketing skill sets that show the passion for the crypto side so they can learn that over time. And I have a soft spot for that because that's how I came into it. But also I think that, you know, it's important for these companies to, and they are starting to notice, we actually can't bring the developer that likes to write sometimes into a marketing position. We need to probably hire marketers that can learn and find the passion for it. So, you know, that's something that my friends that are in marketing that are starting to find it interesting, I'm always encouraging them. I'm like, read all you can read and learn all you can learn, because you instantly enter an interview phase. Even if you're like, I just started learning about this 6 months ago, you're far ahead of the curve of most people that we have come through the door from the non-technical side. So.
Yeah, so just quickly on Emily's point there, pro tip, if you're going to start a company or project in crypto, try to be creative enough not to put bit or coin in the name.
Yeah.
It's not 2014 anymore, it's already been done.
Yeah.
And one other vertical that's quite big that we spend way too much time and attention on is legal. So the lawyers out there, there's huge opportunity. There's a lot of companies that, you know, this is new, and you have to re-engineer legal definitions and how they fit into this. And, you know, is this cryptocurrency an asset? Is it a security? Is it a currency? You know, how do you define those things, and how does that work in the system? That's become a very, very lucrative area of the crypto businesses.
And related to the marketing as well, another thing that that Emily touched on that I want to just kind of emphasize is that it's really hard to talk about these things, especially to the general public, right? It's easy for us to market to other enthusiasts, but to market to just like the general, like Wall Street investors or people that have 401ks, right? To market to those people and to because like to use the internet, you don't have to understand how the internet works. To drive your car, you don't have to understand that it works, but you have to trust that it works, right? And it's really, that's a hard.
And that
hard
marketing
thing to do.
and
It's
communication
challenging.
leads you to have to use analogies. And
Yeah.
so that's how you came up with the term ICO.
Right.
Because people could link it back to an IPO. Okay, they're familiar with that.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, after linking that name to a security, what have we found? The SEC is now calling all of these securities
Right.
because, and that's not the only reason, but that's, probably, if you go back and fix the branding there, you probably wouldn't call it an ICO so close to an initial public offering.
Yeah, and something that you just mentioned makes me think. We started doing these Instagram Live, and we had a customer the other day that wanted to see, like, what do you guys think the future will look like 10, 20 years from now? First off, that's very hard. We can barely look into next week, so there's that. But I think that, when you're talking about the early days of the internet, like, there were not a lot of people could use it because it just hadn't gotten to the point where they didn't have to think when they used it. And I think that right now we are really having to educate people on just the basic terminology, and I'm sure all of us are familiar with someone having questions or battling how Bitcoin works and confirmations and how the blockchain works and blah, blah, blah. And then when you say things like, well, do you know the ins and outs of how wire transfers work? They look at you and they're like, no. And they're like, well, why does that matter? And I'm like, that's exactly, we will get to a stage where I think everyone will be interfacing with blockchain technologies, but they won't know it. It just as anything else. Just as you use Venmo to send money to your friend, you don't really know what's going on back there. It's just going to happen. And I think that that's when we'll see widespread adoption. But until then, this is where we live as far as the communication realm of really needing to communicate every little detail of it, but very well. And that's hard to do when it's such a kind of abstract concept for a lot of people at this point.
Yeah, in the same way that money is an abstract concept for most people, and until they have to encounter something like this, usually when you start the conversation of like, what is Bitcoin or what is crypto, you need to back up with that person and be like, okay, let's start with, what is your conception of money to begin with?
Yeah.
Because it's not something that most people have spent much time thinking about, so even getting into the plumbing of how that works is going to just confuse them even more if you don't start with the basic concepts.
So it sounds like there's definitely no shortage of companies looking to hire. How do we know if a company's legit, and what should we as students or anybody really looking to be employed, what should we look for?
Solid teams. Research the
Yeah.
teams.
Yeah.
Research the projects. If you see, this entire last year, we've been to multiple conferences where just rows of booths. They've all ICO'd, and they're like, I have this big project, but there's like nothing to show for it yet. If you get an offer from a company that wants to make you head of biz dev and you just graduated, you probably want to be like, okay, why are you going to hire me in this very high level position? Or, really make sure you understand who you are working for, and dig into that white paper, find connections with people who might know these people, find them on LinkedIn, see how you can dig a little bit further into understanding the people behind it. Those can help you find the red flags. To your point of, are they legitimate companies? I think that is a very good point to bring up. So.
Yeah, the industry is booming, and so out of that there will be, the very well-intentioned groups that'll try really hard and fail. There'll be the very well-intentioned groups that will try well and succeed, and then there will be the bad-intentioned ones, and you definitely want to avoid those. And so I would advise you to look for honesty. So look for them, some form of humility of like, yeah, we haven't figured this out yet, or we don't know this, or this is an issue. If it's all like, nope, we definitely figured this out, it's we can scale it 10 billion transactions per second, and it's easy, I don't know why anyone else couldn't figure it out. They might not have really dug in far enough to understand, or they're trying to pull it over your eyes. So look for that honesty, look for that self-reflection, because you'll rarely find it in someone who's overly confident and lacks the underlying understanding of the challenge that they're up against.
One other thing I would suggest is if you're not sure, don't be afraid to ask, right? And for example, our industry is still small enough that I think if I got an email from a student, hey, I met you at this hackathon and I'm looking at this company, what do you think? you know, I'd probably respond, right? It's a small enough industry that would probably happen still. Ask around on Reddit, ask around on Twitter, you know.
Oh, that can be misleading.
Well, that is true. That is true. You have to kind of take social media with a grain of salt, for sure. But
Putting all those things together, though.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think
these are just, it's just like collect the facts and try to arrive at it.
I think the fundamental thing that everyone on this panel is saying, which is kind of the ethos of crypto in general, is just kind of like do your own research. Don't take things at face value. Like we're in an industry that's trying to decentralize trust. Don't just trust someone. Like research. Figure out for yourself whether this team looks legit. Have they done projects before? Do they have like any sort of investment backing from like VCs or someone respectable, or did they just raise an ICO and they've never written a lick of code? Like if you're an engineer, look at GitHub. Like see if there's actual code up there that's actually being worked on and maintained and doing something like.
And how many committers?
And how many? Who's actually committing to it? Who's actually helping with issues? Like, there's plenty of information online, just like you would anything else. And just like if you're in the crypto industry and you're going to make an investment in something, like it's on you to do the research. This is kind of the point: is that we don't want a ton of guardrails. We don't want a bunch of people telling you what you can and can't do. We want people to be responsible for themselves.
That said, a nice hack is to find people that you do trust that are smarter than you, and that's. I came with very, very little tech understanding when I joined, started getting into the space. And so I had to fully trust someone else. So you start to vet and find, okay, who really knows their stuff? And then, find out what they're saying. And curate that list and, come to events like this and meet people who know what they're talking about and then, follow them on Twitter and see what they're talking about and ask them. Like Ken was saying, if you just reach out and ask someone about their opinion, they're likely to give it to you.
Yeah, and the one caveat to all of this is kind of like when we're getting to social media stuff. Just because someone calls something a scam doesn't mean it's a scam. Especially in crypto, almost every legitimate project has been attacked as being a scam or someone doesn't like because of some political view they hold in the industry. So
Someone who watches our social media channels.
exactly, just because you
ShapeShift's
Google
a
and
scam,
someone calls it a
everybody
scam doesn't mean it's a scam. To take that with a grain of salt too, and again, do your own research. Doesn't mean that there's not scams out there. There certainly are, but there's also a lot of people yelling really loudly who don't know what they're talking about.
So we talked a little bit about how diverse of a background so many of these blockchain-related companies are, especially with their employees, and their skills. But what skills and experience are blockchain and crypto companies looking for, generally?
Engineers.
Certainly engineers.
Yeah, for sure.
But really, again, this kind of like the earlier question. It's kind of everything. Like we need marketing people, we need engineers, we need product people, we need finance people, we need support. Man, have we needed the industry as a whole needs people actually focused on customer support and UI UX, and it's kind of every real facet of the tech industry and more. We need everything skill wise.
For me, kind of the underlying skills that apply to no matter what you are ability to learn and creativity. Because this is a new industry, what exists today will not exist tomorrow. It'll change and evolve, and so you have to kind of be able to learn. And if you want to be in this, that creativity you create that change. So the people that really excel in this industry do both of those. When I graduated from college, Bitcoin didn't even exist yet. So kind of keeping that open mind of your learning starts today. No matter what your background is, puts you in a day by day. You'll start to level up and really, after a year, know a lot more than your peers and anything that you did when you start down that journey. So,
And if you're passionate in the space, that goes a long way, right? Because your passion is you're gonna be willing to do a lot of things. Like if it happens to be you're working at some company and someone needs to load the dishwasher and you're passionate about the company and the space you're going. It's just passion goes a long way, right? It shows that you care for the company and for the industry, and that's really important.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier that every week's different, and it literally is. So the passion helps when you're having to pivot your brain from week to week too. I think that all of us have moments where we're frustrated or like, this is just be an easy week. But what makes it awesome and makes you want to be in every week is that it's fascinating what we're doing. And so that side of it, I think, is really incredibly important. And from the also non-technical standpoint, I think it's really important if you are non-technical, take some go to Galvanize, take some classes. For you guys, if you have an extra class that you can take an intro to, development class, learn basic HTML, learn how does GitHub actually work? How does that function? When we first started, I actually had to learn how to use GitHub, and I was committing code because there were certain things that the developers did not have time to do. And so I just was like, well, I guess I'm gonna figure this out. And that was, I think, really important because it also allows you to fully wrap your head around what everyone's doing and be a little bit more compassionate towards each other on a day-to-day basis of, I know today was hard for me, but the developers had to go through a lot too. And it allows that, for us, we've been very lucky to create a company that's gotten fairly large, and everyone really is really respectful and enjoys each other's company. And I think that's been super helpful in creating a really amazing environment full of people that are very passionate, work very hard, and at the end of the day, just no matter what the day or the weeks looked like, still love what we do. So that would be one of my recommendations, is really just learn what everyone's doing, so you can at least have a good overarching view of it.
So it sounds like, it's really limitless in terms of, the skills that can apply to blockchain companies. But it really sounds like one of the most important things is having at least a pretty basic understanding of coding. So aside from that, what internships and other things can students or people looking to be hired look out for, or could we apply things outside of blockchain, experiences outside of blockchain to this, or how do you see that as taking a part, in preparing for working in blockchain?
Having experiences outside of the space are going to be extremely important. Your question kind of makes me think of Steve Jobs, who combined typography and computer science and used it to build a beautiful machine where he cared about how it functioned for the user, but then also understood the technical aspects and combined those. I don't think anyone today really knows where this whole space is going to go. So it's going to take people having expertise in all sorts of different areas and saying, I know how Ethereum can solve this problem that I'm having with this thing that I'm very familiar with, and diving into that. And then you either start a company yourself because you want to solve that and you haven't found anybody, or you start researching and realize, oh, there's other people that are also trying to solve this, they've already started a company, and you join them.
Yeah, I would recommend, if you are technical, or even if you're not technical, if you've got some idea, even if it's just kind of a half-baked idea, go ahead and implement it, right? Even if it's not like a full-on implementation, just figure out what's the minimum that you can implement to demonstrate your idea. And that, just the process of doing that makes you better at thinking about the space, and just in general makes you a better engineer if you are an engineer. Makes you a more creative thinker. But then it also, when you are talking to an employer, it's something that you can point to and say, look, I built this. Me and my friends got together and built this thing, and isn't it cool?
I can say when we're interviewing someone, and for whatever the role is, if they've already built something of their own because they're passionate about it, as long as they don't totally screw up the interview, we're going to hire them because we know they already have the passion. They were doing it without being paid, and then we come and say, we'll pay you to do that same thing and provide you lunch too.
Yeah.
Yeah, find something that you're interested in and try to make it happen.
Yeah, experience in general. Like, find ways to get yourself real world experience. All the school in the world is great, but it's never going to replace that. And I see a few too many people who come straight out of school thinking that sometimes like a job, some great, amazing high-level job is going to be handed to them because you have a degree. And the reality is it's not how it works. So be willing to actually like build something, or show that you have that passion, or do something, or just be willing to work your way up sometimes. Sometimes that's all it is, just. Sometimes you have to do some sort of work that's not necessarily what you always dreamed of for a little bit to gain other experience so you can grow. And just don't be afraid of that.
So, what's one piece of career advice that you wish you could tell your younger self?
There's a lot of things.
Yeah.
We dig back in there.
Okay. Go ahead.
I guess this is something that I kind of did follow, and it was whenever I had an opportunity to take a risk, take it.
Within reason.
Yeah.
Within reason, like, obviously follow your heart. Don't just do every crazy thing that comes in front of your path. But right after I got out of school, I had a chance to move to Dubai, or a pretty, normal job in San Francisco, and I took the opportunity, and it just catapulted everything behind it. Especially when you're young, you can take a lot more risks. So don't be afraid to do something that'll maybe make you poor for the next 5 years, but is much more rich in experience. You'll thank yourself later.
I think my biggest thing that I've, especially in the last 4-ish years with ShapeShift, is take constructive criticism to heart, because anyone who's giving it to you, they're wanting you to grow, not they're wanting you to feel bad. And I think that's really important, because I was, when I first started with ShapeShift, there were a few times where John and Eric would give me some feedback, and I'd be like, oh, I think I'm not doing my job well, and I get really worked up, and it was stressing me out. And then the more I started being like, let me sit back and actually think about what they've told me, the better I got at doing my job. And it doesn't ever end too. That's another thing, is it's like every week, every day, there's time that people, even though they don't do your job, they still could teach you things. So I'm always being open to any feedback that people are giving, and sometimes you take it, sometimes you don't, but it's really good to always be open and being like really taking it and thinking about why it was given to you and taking it as a gift, because I think that actually will help you grow much faster than if you are combative against it.
So I think this is going to be one of the most relevant questions to this audience, especially as students that will soon be looking for employment. What is the best way to find job opportunities and apply?
So,
Yes.
go ahead, Ken.
I was going to say the best way is word of mouth, right? To come to events like this and talk to your peers and talk to the sponsors, and that's the best way, right? But there's LinkedIn LinkedIn is a good resource. All those job websites are a good resource, but best way is just to meet.
Yeah, I was basically going to say the same thing. It's kind of network. Like actually reach out to companies or people in the industry that you're involved in, interesting. Like, I can't tell you the number of people I've either ourselves have hired or people in the industry that I know have been hired, especially if they were like an engineer, because they just started committing to some open source GitHub, some project they were interested in. They worked on it for a few months, and then all of a sudden they got offered a job because someone noticed they were doing good work. Like, find ways to contribute and reach out and network with people. And it doesn't have to be face to face; it can be online. But find ways to like connect with other people in the industry. That's going to be your best in if you want to get in one of these type of roles.
That's the lead engineer at KeepKey actually came in through that exact.
He came through submitting PRs for KeepKey.
Was submitting pull requests to KeepKey's source code, and so I was like, hey, what do you think about coming to work for KeepKey? And he's like, yeah, it sounds great. And now he's the lead engineer.
Yeah, at the risk of being repetitive, I'll be repetitive. The only job that I got without networking was my first job out of college. Every job since then I've gotten in the door because I knew somebody, and they knew about the job and they knew about my skills, and somehow I got a match. So it doesn't have to be in person. In person's great. Go to meetups. You can also network online. You can follow people on Twitter and get into conversations and get into Telegram groups and start to make friends all over the world. But networking and meeting people and understanding is going to be the most effective way.
Yeah, and I wanted to add to that. I know that all of us see resumes every week. We're looking at them all the time. And the ones that always stand out to me, especially if it's entry, if it's someone who's about to graduate or just graduated, is if they've had a lot of internship experience, kind of going back to this question before of seeing that maybe you're really active in the Ethereum meetup or that blockchain meetup at your school, meetups, and wanted to bring it back. These events are great. There's a lot of conferences and different networking events that are very expensive as well. You don't necessarily need to spend money to go to them to make those connections too. You can really get involved. Like my first marketing employee, he was very active in an Ethereum meetup, and that is actually where we ended up. I sat down with him because he knew Ethereum inside and out, and that was huge. But he also had this crazy skill set, and that was an amazing first employee to have, because we were just kind of knowing as we started hiring marketers, we might not find that, both sides. We call Ken actually my unicorn. And so, but get involved in the meetups, because there's lots of them between Denver and Boulder. There's amazing ones. Like, we actually, this area has amazing meetups, and we go to a lot of them all over the world. So do that, and then you'll start making connections. And I know that actually too, we look for a lot of applicants through meetups as well. So we'll just kind of do a bat call for that. So you don't necessarily need to spend money on a conference, though those are good routes to go if you have that option. But take time to get that experience through internships. Anytime I see those resumes, I have one employee that had a lot of internship experience, and that was partially why I wanted to bring him on the team, and his passion. So I think that it is really important to work on that side too while you're still in school.
And a nice hack with conferences, Consensus in New York is like what, $1,800 or
It's like $2,000, yeah.
It's very expensive. But you can go to those conferences, get a flight to New York for $179 on Frontier or something, find a friend to stay with, and then just there's usually hackathons and meetups that happen around the event, like while people are in town in New York. Like, they have tons of events going on that are all free. The people that are speaking at Consensus will also be speaking at those. You'll get invited to the parties, and you'll start to meet people. So you don't have to, go to the actual conference. You can hack your way around if
Well, and sometimes you'll run into somebody that'll say, "Oh, you don't have a badge here," right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen that happen.
You'll meet
right?
the organizer, and
Yeah.
they'll be like, "Oh, you're here.
Yeah,
You don't
and-
have a badge. I'll get you in."
And the Consensus Hackathon, they don't advertise this, but they give out a badge to every participant every year. And they don't advertise it, but it happens every year, so.
Yeah, they're actually, also, if you are interested in conferences, contact their sales team, because there are a lot of options. You could say, I'm a student, I'm super interested, and they can give you discounts. I know for a lot of events, for women get a lot of discounts because they're trying to really work on that diversity side. So if you are a female that are interested, call them, just to ask them if they have any sort of discount options on that side as well.
Scholarships, discounts.
Great. Well, before we open up for questions, do any of the panelists have anything that they wanted to bring up, or any questions or comments?
Nothing specific for me. Ready.
Great. Well, I think we'll open it up for questioning. Trace.
Emily, I actually have a question for you. So you're dealing with all the marketing aspects of ShapeShift, and I'm wondering, do you guys have a data analytics team where you guys analyze what's going on with your customers, seeing how fast they're churning, or what do you do for promotions for customers that are always on your website?
We have a very interesting, I do have a strategist who's working on dealing with all of our data. We did buyer persona studies last year once we had gone through our funding round and had the money to do this, where we hired outsourced. So a lot of times at the beginning it is a lot of outsourcing those types of things instead of trying to hack it together internally.
Yeah.
So we did go that route for our buyer personas, but we're starting to build up that side of our team now. But we do not have user accounts. So because of that, there's a little bit of a weirdness in what we can collect. Since we're not necessarily collecting user data, we can't know that Bob is on the site every day doing trades, because we don't know who Bob is. So those are things that we're starting to having to figure out internal solutions on how do we identify this without actually, putting that, we can't, anything that we would do to the customer to collect their data, we'd have to let them know. And a lot of our customers purposely use us because they like the fact that it makes it more secure that we're not collecting their personal information. So that does cause some issues, but that's also a kind of an interesting side of us trying to problem solve that. But yeah, to answer your question, we do data analysis on what we can collect.
My question is to John. What sort of engineering challenges is ShapeShift dealing with?
Good question.
So many. We're building a number of different products in different directions right now, and they all have their own subsets of engineering challenges. One thing that we deal with that's kind of unique for ShapeShift among other crypto exchanges is that everything we do is on chain. So like you go to like Poloniex or Bittrex or one of these other more centralized order book exchanges, and you sign up an account and they take custody of your funds, and all the trading happens internally in their database, and then eventually you might withdraw something. That's actually a lot easier to handle than what we do, where every single transaction, every single trade through ShapeShift's platform is 2 blockchain transactions. And this means that we stress the blockchains a lot more than your average service, and we run into a lot of the rough edges and problems with this software that still exists. You know, Bitcoin, even though it's been around since, almost, over 10 years at this point, close to that, not quite. It's still none of this stuff is perfect. It's all still in development, and there's a lot of edges to the software that at scale you hit. So our biggest challenges are really the scaling ones related to actually the blockchain software itself. And sometimes that means we have to deal with the actual development teams, the open source teams who maintain the software, because it's in basically like an alpha or maybe generous beta level of software, and there's issues with it that we run into at scale because the developers don't test these things at scale. The businesses do.
How do you guys address liquidity when people are trading, like when they want to exchange X coin for Bitcoin? Somebody's coming in, it's like always exchanging this one coin. How do you guys do liquidity?
So ShapeShift's unique in that we don't, we solve the liquidity problem in the back end and don't expose that to the user. So we have a limited amount that a user can buy at one time, which is roughly $5,000 worth. And with our platform, the price is the price. So there's no additional fees. There's not going to be slippage based on the size of the order. We kind of deal with that in the background. Then in the background, the code that we've written is looking at prices globally and kind of understanding, okay, how can we price this? And so we're looking very deeply at the liquidity of all the books, putting them together, and then so we try to handle that trading complexity in the back end so that users can just come and say, I have Ethereum and I want Doge. For any of you that are active traders, you've probably seen that most of the trading happens through Bitcoin or Tether. There's not too many, Vertcoin to Digibyte trading at most exchanges, but at ShapeShift, all of our pairs are tradable with all others because we hide that complexity in the background.
Along those lines, you guys are doing market orders, right? You're not doing, you don't do limit orders and
Essentially, yes.
Yeah, basically.
Is there an anticipated future where that might be applicable?
Confidential. Maybe.
We have looked at that problem.
Yeah.
We're building a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Curious, so I kind of see ShapeShift as like between a traditional exchange and a decentralized exchange, but I'm curious what you guys think of the future of decentralized exchanges and sort of, where it's going to go.
Yeah, so decentralized exchanges have a lot of challenges. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff being developed on it. I think you're right in the way you categorize ShapeShift. We're almost like a hybrid. We're not really decentralized, but we're not quite, we're custodianless, so we have some of the benefits of decentralization. And I think there's a lot, the last year we saw, I can't even count. It must have been 1 billion DEXs that launched, it feels like. But it's probably closer to under 100, but it feels like there's a ton. And they're all trying to get something off the ground. They all have various approaches to it. There's a lot of interesting experimentation going on. And I think that they're on the right track because custodianlessness, as we've known at ShapeShift, is very important to the future of this technology, in my opinion. Now, the issue is there's always the kind of a chicken or the egg problem there because when you have a DEX like that, most of them are stuck just trading, for example, Ethereum and tokens, and it really limits the liquidity potential on the market. And it's, liquidity begets liquidity. So if you don't have liquidity to start, it's really hard to build it up. And a lot of these, that is the number one reason most DEXs are not super successful yet, is they're just trying to get their order books built. And they're not quite there yet. I think that will get better over time, but I do think you'll see a number of different types, and I've seen this even a little bit with experimentation that someone like Bitfinex is doing with like Ffinex. You will see these kind of hybrid attempts, and in some ways, at least in the short term, a hybrid model might actually be better than a straight DEX, in my opinion, because you can get a lot of the benefits of a DEX as well as having some of the benefits of centralization without having to go too far on either side. Because when you go to a DEX, you gain a lot of security and custody control, but you also lose a lot of the liquidity and the speed of internal order matching and all these various things. What you really want is an exchange that can do all these things fast and get rid of that custody so that you're not exposed to counterparty risk. And I think we haven't quite seen those solutions out there in the way that I think they need to be yet. I think the DEXs will start to get closer to that, and I think a number of the companies in the space will release products that help solve that problem. But I don't know exactly where it's going, but I think it's going in the right direction.
Yeah, and a little comment just from the marketing PR side of that too. I've met a few of the CMOs from those DEXs, and the thing that they're always scared about is they can't really protect their customers terribly well, because if anyone can list an asset, you could have, you know, some scam coins get up there or other things that really can be from a company perspective, it can be really hard if something blows up that maybe that coin is listed on your site. But it doesn't allow you to educate your customers very well on every single thing that could be up there, and making sure that you help them not make their decision, but make better informed decisions. So that's something that the more I've read about the DEXs and the more people I meet that are involved in that, that's something that I'm kind of glad that we can be more helpful and be more protective for our customers in that respect.
Is that plain and speak how you decide what interpreters need based on your site?
That's a great question.
Does which part play?
Just like sort of making sure that you like pick ones that you think are reliable and that aren't going to have problems or things like that. What in general are the guidelines you use to decide what to put on your team?
Yeah, so this is constantly evolving as the legal and regulatory landscape evolves, especially. Traditionally, at ShapeShift, we're not trying to make like an endorsement. We are clearly, obviously, not trying to ever list anything that we think is a straight-up scam or something like that. We have no interest in doing that. We try to do enough due diligence to do that. But at the same time, we're not trying to endorse everything we add either. The idea is to add interesting projects that the market has demand for, that people want to trade. And we don't really want to be the arbiter of which projects are successful or not. We want the markets to decide that, because that's the proper place for it. So as these kind of things have evolved, we kind of have a process that things have to go through to, you know, make sure that we feel comfortable that we're looking at all the various things, that it's not a scam, that it is hopefully something, you know, at least for ShapeShift's case, that is we believe is, you know, very low chance or not a security in our opinion, things like that we have to be careful about. And that is also different based on jurisdictions. Like, you know, based on the way the U.S. views this problem versus Switzerland, our headquarters use this problem, in other parts of the world, there's no consistency right now. So this question of like which assets can you and can't you list is one that's just kind of overhanging the industry, and we're all trying to figure out and engage with, you know, the legislative and regulatory process so that we can get clear on that. But it's certainly a priority of ours not to add assets that are straight scams.
I got another question for you, Emily. So about when you're introducing a new product, what are some of the challenges that you go through since you don't have all the customer data? How do you go about targeting new customers with this new project, you know, or new product line?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I mentioned the buyer personas, and that's been a really important thing that we dug into. We do user surveys, so we can actually, when you finish an exchange with ShapeShift, we prompt you to take a survey if you'd like, and that's really the best way that we've been collecting data, and a lot of our users take hits, so that's been helpful. So from that, we were able to create these fairly well-defined 4 user types. So when we're putting together new information, what we realized is we had, especially in 2017, a lot of what they called the noobs. So a lot of people who just they like woke up 3 days in a row where they heard something about Bitcoin on the news, and they're like, I should just get involved in that, and didn't really do a lot of due diligence. So from that, knowing that, okay, we need to have our content written, and I've been working a lot with Ken's team recently on some of the messaging we put out, where we talk about, here's the technical explanation for this. Now let's break it down and talk to you about what this actually means, so that you can actually hit both groups of more technical users versus non-technical, so that they can actually understand what they're doing. And then analogies, Justin brought that up earlier. What traditionally already exists that people understand that is relatable to this new thing that's never existed? We actually launched one of our newest products. It's still in private beta. It's called Prism, and it's a portfolio asset manager, and it's you utilize it using smart contracts through Ethereum. That had never existed. So when we were starting to get all the materials together, like, we have to really we have to figure out what it relates to, but it doesn't really relate to anything, but how close can we get? So I think the analogies are still very important, and being able to onboard people into understanding what they're doing. So, but as far as content materials, I mean, we're doing everything we can. So understanding too that individuals all learn, other people have to have a visual. So for KeepKey, for instance, utilizing the device, we have a series of demo videos that allows people to understand this is exactly what you do every step of the way to make sure that everything is done correctly. So having those visual elements, we're just now, as my team's been growing, we're putting together a pretty robust content team. So anytime we launch new projects from now on, making sure we have infographics, we have all sorts of visual content so they can interface in many different ways to learn. Because it is a lot right now, with this being such a new industry, it is so much about learning and us teaching, you learning, all the ins and outs of what we're doing, so you can conceptualize these new projects that are just, they can be very hard to conceptualize. But that's kind of the route that we've started to take, and it's been fairly effective.
With these new projects, one thing that I've seen with ShapeShift is a best practice in product design. So the best example that I have is how ShapeShift came about. So back in 2014, Eric Voorhees, who founded it, wanted to buy some Litecoin. He'd been a Bitcoin maximalist, only believed in Bitcoin, but then kind of was like, okay, I should probably give this a try. And it was really difficult. He had to go to an exchange, sign up, submit some paperwork, make a deposit, do the trade, and then withdraw, and then wait for that to happen. It was like, wait, this is all digital. This should be easier. And so he realized, okay, I can build something that works for me that's faster than the current solution. So if you're thinking, as you're thinking about product design, and Trace, you and I had a quick conversation before this about what you've been building, and it seems like you follow this, build something that you want to use, because this is such a new space. A lot of people have that same problem that you do, most likely.
KeepKey's history is very similar to that. We looked at the Trezor and it was like, yeah, that's a great product, but that's not the product you want to use. So we built KeepKey.
Want something more secure to keep your funds in, build it yourself if it doesn't exist.
Yeah, and with that, if you are creating your own projects, have people that aren't, they don't understand the tech side to use it, so they can give you feedback. Because I do think that design and that experience with your product is really important for it to actually do well. So even with building out all these kind of walkthroughs for the customer when we're selling a new product, we also need to also test it internally a lot. Have friends use it so they can be like, what on earth is happening here? Like, I get to step 2 and then I have no idea, and then fix that before it even goes anywhere. That way it's more likely when you're marketing it that it will be successful because people actually intuitively can use it, because intuitiveness with all these is very important.
Okay, so unfortunately this is all that we have time for, but I really want to thank John, Emily, Justin, and Ken for coming on and doing this with us, and for KeepKey and ShapeShift for sponsoring us. We really appreciate it, and thank you for all of you guys who are here listening. I think this was a great opportunity. I think everybody really learned a lot here, and I hope we got a lot out of this. So thank you very much.
And there's going to be somebody in our booth all weekend, all day today, all day tomorrow. So if you are interested in talking to us, please stop by.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't forget the KeepKey.